Hello, everyone, and welcome into the crowded booth. A familiar face alongside me if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening, it's Palmer Thombs back on the show. Georgia Tech fans will not enjoy this program, but hey, it is what it is. Palmer, appreciate you coming on, man. How are you doing through the first 2 weeks of the season?
It's been slow, man. Georgia hosting UT Martin and Ball State. Definitely excited to see some SEC competition come to town this weekend with them hosting South Carolina. It has been very nice. I mean, I know you've been on the road traveling to Orlando, and then heck, you were in Atlanta there too. And we were just talking about your trip to Starkville this weekend. It's been nice, and it continues to be nice that Georgia plays at home in September. First road trip that we'll make over at DawgsHQ is to Auburn, and that's going to be a day trip for us. So the first overnight stay that we're going to make is not until October 13th, 14th, 15th, that weekend when they go up to Vanderbilt.
And honestly, for a lot of our viewing and listening audience down there in the Columbus, Georgia area, Auburn doesn't even really feel like a true road trip for the Georgia fans in the Columbus area. It's a 30-minute drive, right across the Chattahoochee River. So, hey, when is the true first road trip for you guys?
Yeah, it's Nashville. I mean, and that one's going to be a sea of red and black there at the newly renovated, continuing renovation at Vanderbilt. We'll go down to Jacksonville. We'll fly down there. That's kind of our big road trip. But I mean, this is a Georgia fans' dream, this road schedule, because everything is very, very drivable. I mean, within 5 hours, 6 hours, kind of depending, where you're coming from and what traffic is, you know as well as anyone. You hit Atlanta at the wrong time, a 3-hour trip becomes a 6-hour one real quick.
Yeah. And before we start the show, or officially, I should say, the Instagram live that I did while at the tailgate and between Georgia Tech and Louisville, what was my prediction? 33-6. And
it was something like that.
It was like crazy. And Palmer was like, even I don't know if I feel like that. But hey, we'll talk about Georgia Tech later on in the season. But right now, Georgia has kicked it off. And look, we're not going to sit here and berate the point of the weakness of the schedule. It is what it is through the first 2 weeks. But Palmer, a lot of the fans on social media, I'm sure on your boards over at DawgsHQ, have expressed frustration, expressed concern. The Mike Bobo, reenactment, the number 2 version 2.0 of Mike Bobo in Georgia and Athens, and then Carson Beck. I mean, were Georgia fans had too high of hopes for Beck just to come in seamlessly after watching the way Stetson Bennett played for the past couple of seasons?
I think yes. In terms of expecting him to just roll in there with the first few games and look like he's a seasoned vet. I mean, because that's exactly what Stetson Bennett was. I mean, if you recall that 2020 season with Stetson Bennett when he was a first-time starter, it was nothing special. They struggled offensively, and they were getting used to a new offensive coordinator and the quarterback, and obviously he ends up getting banged up and they lose a couple of games. And I don't think this season's going to go that way. The schedule doesn't. That was an all SEC slate. You had a road trip to Alabama. Florida was an incredible team that year. This schedule doesn't have that kind of a game on there.
Yeah.
But I think that some of the struggles per se that you're seeing with this Georgia team early on, and specifically this Georgia offense, and even more specifically Carson Beck, I think it's kind of a result of, hey, expectations were sky high for this kid. And I think that he could have a really good season. He's just got to get comfortable. And I think that's on Mike Bobo. It's on this offensive staff. It's on everybody. It's on the weapons around him, the players around him, to get him comfortable. And honestly, I mean, if you look at Georgia and, the guys that have been out there with him, they haven't had Ladd McConkey. They didn't have Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint in that first game. They haven't had Dejan Edwards. Kendall Milton's not 100%. They haven't really fully unleashed Brock Bowers. And the run game has struggled. And so, the weapons around him haven't been what expectations were. So, for as much criticism as Carson Beck is getting, I think it's probably fair to put some of that on the other players in this offense. But look, they've put up, 48 points and 45 points now. there was a special team score and a defensive score in there as well. But, hey, Mike Bobo is not going to complain about that in terms of points per game. And we're going to learn a lot more about this Georgia team, and starting this week as the SEC schedule starts.
Yeah, 3:30 CBS game against South Carolina. Obviously, coming off of what I think and I believe I read this correctly, Palmer, is the largest margin of victory that they've ever beat South Carolina, 48-7 last year in Columbia. And yeah, let's just say what it is. I changed the viewpoint on you like 15 times during you talking. I think I went like widescreen. People listening have no clue, but what we did on here changed it. That's okay. Dominated South Carolina last year, the idea of Beamer ball. One thing for me before we kind of get full into this preview, Palmer, is when you look at South Carolina up front, both defensive line and offensive line, not up to par, I think, with where they want to be in the SEC. Does it feel like Georgia is going to stay vanilla and try to really use this game, but to maybe give some confidence to running backs? I mean, how many touches is Dylan Bell going to get out of the backfield? I mean, this offensive line as a whole, is this a chance for them to really prove against an SEC opponent and to get some momentum rolling for the rest of the conference slate?
I think yes, but I also don't know that the way to do that is by staying vanilla. I mean, I think that you want to open it up a little bit. You want to get aggressive. You want to do what your offense is capable of doing. And the best way to do that is by, unleashing the full capabilities of that playbook. And, to think that Georgia, showed all their cards against UT Martin and Ball State would be foolish. Mike Bobo's been around long enough. Kirby Smart's been around long enough. This entire coaching staff is, very experienced, and they know that they didn't have to play an A game. They didn't have to, like I said, show all their cards and take out every trick in the bag to beat those teams. And Georgia did not play their A game. But they come away with two, wide margins of victory there. And I think that as this SEC slate is getting started, you're going to see more. I think that opening up the playbook, taking, heck, we saw more against Ball State than we did, UT Martin. I think Georgia, they took some more shots downfield. It wasn't as much, by design, screen plays and short passes. I think that's great to get Carson Beck comfortable, but I also think that this is a guy with a really strong arm that's capable of pushing it downfield. And, one way to get him comfortable is picking up a lot of yardage. And so, when you've got receivers like Arian Smith and Dominic Lovett, Mekhi Muse, you want to throw him in there. He's been outstanding so far. Again, Marcus Rosemy-Jack-Saint is a guy that this offense is comfortable with. And when they do get Ladd McConkey back, it's for me, it's not an if, it's a win. Because I do think that I know for a fact that he's practicing and, that he's getting closer and closer, and it's just a comfort thing. And, they were a little bit precautionary with him in those first two games, and interested to see if we see him on Saturday. We may not, but when he gets back, that's another weapon to, open this offense up.
You talk offensively, and I think there was a lot of talk. Could Carson Beck having a 1,000-yard receiver? Well, the leading one so far is Mekhi Muse with 102 yards catching. Talk about the impact that this legitimate little guy has made, both special teams and, what has he done? Was it something during fall camp, during summer, that really earned the trust and the keep of this staff to say, hey, look, we're going to put you out there on Saturdays and you're going to go make some plays for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's been an exciting spark for this offense. And like you said, the special teams aspect of it, that's very important to Kirby Smart. And so if you can add something to this team on special teams, he's not afraid to use you, in that way. And that's, if you're a walk-on, if you're a starter, if you can provide this team, with something special, he's going to use you there. And so Mekhi Muse certainly has been that, with the punt return, he's been great on kickoff return. I mean, to be averaging, if my math was correct and my memory is correct on the math that I did, I think he's got like 310 yards of total, yardage here through 2 weeks, receiving and return yardage. Obviously, it helps when you've got a 54-yard screen pass that goes to the house, a 69-yard, punt return that goes to the house, two long plays in there, but he's been explosive. He's provided this team with a spark, and that's certainly something that every player from top to bottom on this team is excited about.
I know you obviously talked with some of the defensive players on Monday. You're going to be talking with offensive guys later in the week. Defensively, what type of challenge does South Carolina pose? Because I sit in the camp, if Spencer Rattler is on, he's really hard. If you give him time, he's really hard to defend. We've seen that in spurts so far in Columbia. What kind of challenge did those guys talk about in Kirby Smart about the South Carolina offense?
You're hit the nail on the head there with you've got to give Spencer Rattler time. You look at when he's had time, he's been pretty special. There's a reason that he was so highly touted coming out of high school, but he did not have time in that opener against North Carolina. And this offensive line at South Carolina has struggled, to protect the quarterback, to run the ball. So I think for Georgia defensively, it's on this defensive line to get pressure. It's on the linebackers to bring pressure as well. It's a situation where the secondary is going to be challenged. They've got, South Carolina's got two really good receivers there in Xavier Leggett and Juice Wells. So Georgia's going to be challenged. They've got a quarterback capable of getting the ball to those explosive playmakers, but the way to, kind of ease that challenge a little bit, to diminish the South Carolina attack there is that defensive line getting home and Michael Williams and all those guys up front. I would look for those guys to have a big game and like you said, later in the week, we'll have, players to watch and keys to victory and stuff. And that's certainly one of them. You have to get in Spencer Rattler's face, affect him and make his day long.
Georgia opens up as a 27.5-point favorite currently. That's a lot of points for an SEC team. How do you feel about this game overall going into it? I mean, I imagine that you, along with a lot of other folks, feel the Dogs can win this game and will. But how explosive can Georgia be in this game against the South Carolina team that it could get out of hand or they could keep it close depending on what Shane Beamer shows up?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you there and think that that's the big question. That's the unknown with this team so far. Because of those first two opponents, we haven't seen the Georgia that everybody expects to see. And I think that was, we saw how this team came out and played last season against Oregon and how they got up for that big game there. But then they kind of fell to the challenge against, Samford in week 2. I think it was 33-0 there, and it was far from impressive. But then they got right back up and put it on South Carolina there in Columbia. Like you said, the largest margin of victory in this border war between two teams that, share geographically a region and an area for recruiting and fans too. Yeah. I think that can this team cover that 27.5? Absolutely. I probably because I think that they're going to be a little bit more explosive and open things up a little bit more offensively. Because I think they're going to do that, and I trust this defense. I mean, this defense to me is already looking the part of that 2021 unit. It's hard to compare them to that right now because we saw how dominant that unit was all season long. And we've seen this team, this unit for 2 games, but I think that they've got the potential because they're certainly talented in all the right places. But combine those two factors, a defense that I trust regardless of who the opponent is, and an offense that I think is going to open it up, I do think that Georgia can cover that 27.5.
I wanted to get this question for you before we get out of here. Obviously talking about Georgia, South Carolina, but the SEC as a whole. The SEC West and my fellow brethren down here in Baton Rouge, College Station, Tuscaloosa, struggling, especially against ACC competition, which, the Tech fans are enjoying, even though they haven't played a part in it. Wanted to get your take on this. I don't imagine that the players inside that locker room, really because the staff's not going to let them, say, holy cow, like we've got a big chance. But is it one of those things that even though we haven't seen a lot out of Georgia, they really haven't been tested? You got to be thinking, a lot of fans thinking, oh, wow, like that path to get back to the playoff is not looking as daunting. Still just week 3 we're entering. What are your thoughts on the SEC as a whole?
I think that it's probably the fall of the SEC as the top conference in college football is probably being blown out of proportion a little bit. I do think that, look, Florida State is a really good team. Texas is a really good team. Miami has the talent, and Texas A&M has shown that they, are capable, to play with the really good teams, but also, perfectly. It's not out of the norm to see them kind of fall to the occasion there. So, to me, I think that, like I said, I think it's being blown a little bit out of proportion. We had a discussion over on our message board over at DawgsHQ about Alabama and are they more likely to go 11-1 or 9-4? Well, guys, I mean, I'll say it here. I said it there. This Alabama team is very talented. They are perfectly, they are entirely capable of running the table and playing Georgia and matching up well with Georgia in the SEC championship. So I don't think that, because Georgia, I mean, look, at the West opponents for Georgia, Auburn, you didn't really expect a ton out of them anyway. I think Ole Miss has probably been a little bit of a pleasant surprise to fans, and that game's late in the season, so we'll know a lot more about Ole Miss here in a couple of weeks when they take on Alabama. When they have some of those tougher games. Who do they have this week? I can't remember.
But they play LSU in 2 weeks. I know that'll be a game that will be up there, so you'll play the meat of your SEC schedule before that one.
Oh, I mean, that's November 11th, I believe, is the date. So, we will know a lot more about Ole Miss by then. So, to me, I think that the teams that Georgia was playing out of the West, you didn't have a super high expectations for them coming into the season. It's not those 3 top tier teams that everyone kind of had circled and agreed upon, LSU, Alabama, and Texas A&M there. They don't get a tough Arkansas team with the veteran quarterback and running back. You end up facing teams that you probably didn't have all too high of hopes for anyway. And then I think the East schedule again. I mean, to me, the team that has underperformed to this point is Tennessee. But again, they haven't really been tested. I mean, Virginia is one of the worst Power 5 football teams in the country, it seems. Hosting Austin Peay, you're not gonna unleash everything. So in the same vein that we talk about Georgia and their potential to prove a lot of people wrong this week and kind of open things up against South Carolina, Tennessee has the capability to do that against Florida and change the narrative surrounding them. And then outside of that, again, the rest of that East schedule, you didn't expect a ton from. This South Carolina team, I think the narrative that surrounds them right now is very much so about that offensive line. And like we said, can you protect Spencer Rattler? Because of their big game, they, kind of failed to show up there and failed to protect him, giving up, 9 sacks and
I think North Carolina had 17 sacks all season last year, and I believe it was 9 in week 1.
And 16 tackles for loss. So, if that's the South Carolina that you're going to be facing, and it very well could be, Georgia should do very similar things to them. But again, I think that, maybe South Carolina is the only team that hasn't quite lived up to the expectations from Georgia's schedule so far. But Tennessee, I don't take too much stock into their first 2 games. Ole Miss, it was an impressive win over Tulane to go on the road and beat a team that won a New Year's Six bowl game last year. So, if for as much as South Carolina's stock may have fallen, Ole Miss's may have risen. And so then, it kind of equals out to exactly where Georgia fans were expecting the schedule to be all year long.
Yeah, we're going to be entering SEC play. You mentioned Tennessee, Florida. We're going to be previewing that game tomorrow as a part of our live show. And I think that's going to be one where, I don't think Florida's very good, but I think that you're going to learn more things about Tennessee against some better competition. And it'll be,
and going on the road.
That's still not an ezy place to play.
No. And I think Georgia is lucky that it doesn't have to play there, every other year because, for as neutral as that game in Jacksonville is, you certainly don't have to go into the hostile environment that because it's a 50-50 split. You're going to have Florida fans, you're going to have Georgia fans. A lot of times, at least in the games that I've covered there, Georgia has outnumbered Florida because of the success that the two programs have been having. That would not be the case if they were playing in Gainesville. And it wouldn't be the case here in Athens if Florida was coming to town. You wouldn't see a ton of Florida fans here, but, it's a much less hostile environment there in Jacksonville. So, Georgia fans, count your blessings that you're not having to go into the swamp every other year. And, certainly interested to learn see what we learn about Tennessee going in there this week.
Yeah, a lot of great SEC matchups with LSU, Mississippi State. You're going to learn, and a lot of opportunities for teams to gain confidence getting into their SEC schedule. Georgia, South Carolina, 3:30 local time over there on the East Coast. CBS game, which, look, I never have a problem with the CBS game. It's kind of in the middle of the day, but it means you get to, go out to dinner afterwards and still enjoy your night, but you also get to sleep in a little bit, so it's not too bad. Palmer, appreciate you as always, man. Let us know and let the folks know where they can find your work and more Georgia, South Carolina coverage.
Yeah, come on over to DawgsHQ. We've got a sign-up special going, 25% off for your first year, $1 for your first month. So, if you're just looking to get a taste of what we've got, everything that we've got to offer, it's a big recruiting weekend. KJ Bolden's coming to town. That's certainly something that's of interest to SEC fans, with him, choosing Florida State over Georgia and Auburn and Alabama and all these other schools. So that's going to be exciting to see, kind of the fallout of that. Got a couple of 5-stars coming in town. So this is a big one, big recruiting weekend, big weekend on the field as Georgia opens SEC play. So head on over to DawgsHQ. Come check out the work of me, Jake Rowe, Jake Roos, Wes Blankenship, Jeremy Johnson, and Rusty Mansell.
I know you guys added so much staff. Like, do you have like a note on the side?
I just counted on my fingers underneath the table.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Palmer Thombs, as always, joining us. You've been joining us. We'll probably try to get you here on weekly, talking a little Georgia update for our fans down there in the Chattahoochee Valley and all across the Southeast. Appreciate it as well. We'll catch you next time here on another episode of The Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with